This episode of the D-Lew podcast is brought to you by Happy Wrap. You ever wanted to design your very own gift wrapping paper? Now is your chance to do so. Whether it's for the holiday season, weddings, anniversaries, birthdays, no matter what the occasion calls for, you can use Happy Wrap to wrap your gifts. As a matter of fact, you can even design notebooks, greeting cards, gift tags, and so much more. You can sign up today at happy.thedlewpodcast.com and use the promo code DLEW to get your 10% discount at checkout. Again, that's happy.thedlewpodcast.com and use promo code DLEW to get your 10% discount at checkout. By Simpler Hair Color. Hey guys, are you tired of using that drugstore hair dye brand that isn't getting the job done? If you want to use a great product to cover those grays, have no fear, Simpler Hair Color is here. No mixing, no dripping, no mess. It's super easy to use, whether you're a beginner or a pro. Go to simpler.thedlewpodcast.com and use promo code DLEW10 for your 10% discount at checkout. Again, that's simpler.thedlewpodcast.com and use my promo code DLEW10 for your 10% discount at checkout. And by WWE Shop with Fanatics. Get your favorite WWE Superstars merchandise and wear them proud with superstars like the OTC Roman Reigns, Rhea Ripley, the Second City Saint CM Punk, John Cena, Main Event Jey Uso, the American Nightmare Cody Rhodes, and so many more. Oh, by the way, they got some really cool championship belts in there as well. So go to wrestling.thedlewpodcast.com. Again, that's wrestling.thedlewpodcast.com so you can go to WWE Shop with Fanatics. Welcome to another edition of the D-Lew podcast, brought to you by Believe Network and Siete Media. I'm your host, Derrick T. Lewis, and I hope you all had an incredible Labor Day weekend, as did I. And before I get started with the episode, I want to thank each and every one of you, for your continuous support of the show, whether you're listening on your podcast feeds or if you're watching on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your continuous support. If you haven't done so already, hit the subscribe button on my YouTube channel. If you go to Derrick T. Lewis in the search engine, and when you hit the bell, make sure you hit all so you get all notifications for all content on my YouTube channel. And of course, hit the subscribe button on your podcast feeds, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and even Amazon Music as well. So make sure you do that. Also, you can go to my two t-shirt and merchandise stores. You can go to pwt.derricklewis.com. That's my pro wrestling tee store. And of course, the Derrick T. Lewis official merchandise store over at shop.derricklewis.com. Make sure you follow the social media pages on all that I have going on. So my social media is at the real DT Lew. You can go to the D-Lew podcast social media on all platforms at the D-Lew podcast, and the recently revamped page for my production company, you can go to at Siete Media on all platforms. Well, again, like I said, I hope you had a great Labor Day weekend, as I said in the opening of the show. But as for me, Labor Day was awesome. But this past Tuesday, yours truly attended the opening reception for the Newark International Film Festival, where again, my music video and Angie Starr's Espacion is actually been selected, but of course is in the running for best music video. So keep your fingers crossed for us rather. And such a great time. I had a chance to run into a really good friend of mine that I've known for 38 years, legendary actor extraordinaire, JD Williams, friend of the show. And also a good friend of mine that I hadn't seen in so long, but she's been in the industry over 25 years, Lisa Durden. So we had a chance to really just catch up and everything. But it was an awesome experience. And, this Sunday is the awards ceremony. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. Before I get into my interview with Dr. David L. Shabazz, I want to acknowledge the recent news that came out as I'm recording this on a Thursday morning, a very early Thursday morning, I might add, um, that AEW pay-per-views to stream live on HBO Max, starting with All Out. That's going to be on September 20th. I'm just going to just paraphrase for what I got from Variety.com, and they said the streaming service will begin live airings of AEW's pay-per-views starting September 20th with all AEW All Out, which originate from Scotiabank Arena in Toronto, Canada, leading into All Out. TNT and HBO Max will air AEW Saturday Tailgate Brawl, All Out, beginning at 2 p.m. Eastern on September 20th. Now, wait a minute. I said 2 p.m. Yeah, so Tony Khan, to his credit, knowing that what was coming because of the fact that WWE is doing WrestlePalooza on ESPN. That's their first PLE on ESPN. They're moving their show from, I guess, an 8 p.m. start, 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. start to a 3 p.m. start, which I think was probably the best scenario because that's what happened at All In 2 months ago, where Tony had to move it from an 8 p.m. not to compete with Saturday Night's Main Event to a 3 p.m. Well, it was 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Central when I was in Texas. But I think it was a really good move by Tony Khan. The only thing I will say is that I'm not sure how long the pay-per-view model, for AEW is going to continue because I mean, let's face it, right now everything is streaming. You figure we're paying for these streaming services already, and now we got to pay an additional $40 on top of the streaming service. So it's like, I don't know. And they're doing 8 pay-per-views a year right now. So we'll see how long that lasts. And again, pulling for AEW, pulling for all that they're doing. I'm actually hoping that I'm in Toronto in 2 weeks to cover their event. We'll see. Keep your fingers crossed also. But that's all for that in regards to wrestling news. But this week, I advertised earlier this week on my social media. I have an author, that's going to be on this episode that I had a chance to interview. He has a book out right now entitled Pro Wrestling's Black World Champions, and again, Dr. David L. Shabazz, and we talk about the book, some of the history of African Americans in pro wrestling and some of the trials and tribulations they've gone through and where we are today and the work that we have to continue to do to get to where we want to be. And let's not wait any longer. My exclusive interview with Dr. David L. Shabazz starts right now. Well, ladies and gentlemen, my guest this week is an award-winning writer, author, educator, speaker, and recording artist. He is the author of 4 books, including the newly released third edition of Pro Wrestling's Black World Champions. He's the one and only Dr. David L. Shabazz. Dr. Shabazz, first and foremost, thank you so much for giving me your time and coming on to the D-Lew podcast. How are you, sir?
Hey, brother, I'm doing good. I'm just glad to be here on your show.
All right, man. I appreciate you coming, like I said, coming on. So we're gonna get into the book, in a little bit, but just to kind of give an introduction to you and everything, talk about life growing up in South Carolina.
Oh, wow. I grew up in a small town called Clinton, South Carolina.
Okay.
They have probably about, it's grown some, so it's probably up to about 8,000 people now.
Okay.
So very small town.
Right.
Um, it was a close knit town.
Hmm.
One of those places where everybody knew
Knew
everybody.
everybody. Right.
Yeah, wrestling was huge. Uh, Back in that part of South Carolina, it was wrestling and racing, NASCAR. I mean, you
Hmm.
did one of those two or both. So
Right.
it was good though. I mean, because again, it was close knit. Everybody knew each other and kind of a good community feel.
Yeah, you hear stuff like that a lot, especially in the South, where it's like some of the towns that are like rural towns where it may be a small population, but again, if you know somebody maybe a mile down the road, that person's gonna know someone else that knows you.
Right.
So to your point, even though you could be several miles apart, the tight knitness is always there, and I hear that a lot, especially in the South. So you mentioned wrestling and NASCAR. So how did wrestling into your life? Were you watching wrestling? Obviously during the Crockett era.
Oh yeah, yeah. I grew up watching it. My family watched professional wrestling. So I mean, my mom, my grandmother watched it. So I mean, it's that deep in my family. So
Hmm.
it's I grew up watching it.
So who are some of those that stood out to you as a kid, growing up watching pro wrestling?
Oh wow. JYD, Junkyard Dog.
Yes.
Um,
God bless dog.
you
Yes.
know, Ric Flair. I've got to admit, being in South Carolina at that
Hmm.
time, I saw Georgia Championship Wrestling,
Hmm.
and Mid Atlantic. So I saw Hulk Hogan. I saw some of the guys in the WWF at that time, but that was really the Northern Territory. I was watching the Southern guys most of the time because that's who was there. Um, even well, I think was in the Andre the Giant. I think was in the AWA at the time. But
Hmm.
they traded talent
Moved
throughout
around.
the. This was the
The
territory
territories.
time.
Yes.
So yeah,
Yeah, you mentioned it's crazy. It's funny. I grew up in North Jersey, and believe it or not, the first promotion that I was introduced to was not the WWF. It was Georgia Championship Wrestling on Channel 17 TBS. Thanks to my
wow.
mother. I was 4 years old watching Ric Flair cutting a promo. That was my first introduction to pro wrestling.
And you
Georgia
were hooked.
Championship Wrestling, and I was hooked from day one. And then a year later, a little bit later, then when the Iron Sheik had won the title around that time, I got with the WWF, and then of
Yeah.
course January 23rd, 1984. The rest is history. After that, and Rock and Wrestling, and I was watching Mid Atlantic and all that stuff, and it was an incredible era to have experience. You know what I mean? When
Mhm.
it wasn't to me. We didn't see it as a war. We just seen it as wrestling's on TV. You know what I mean?
Right. Right. That's the way it was. I mean, you just everybody watched it and everybody loved it. And the talent, is one of the things I really would like to see a lot more these days. I mean, the mic skills, not just the ring talent. The ring talent is good too, but you gotta, like you were saying, you gotta learn how to cut a promo, man. I mean,
Yes.
that's that's what draws
Yeah.
people in.
Yes,
And
indeed.
there's it's like Dusty Road. There is a guy. I currently live in Kentucky,
Hmm.
and there is I saw I don't know how much props I want to talk about this, but
Oh, yeah.
I'll say a politician because this guy's running for an office and all. So, but there's a politician who actually was using Dusty Rhodes' Hard Times in one of his political ads. I'm like,
Really?
that's Dusty Rhodes. And you can't really talk about, giving somebody a gold watch these days. That's even telling how old that is
Kick him
to
in the
use
butt and tell him a computer took your job, daddy. That's hard times. And what's funny? This October, we're coming up on 40 years of the Hard Times promo. It
Wow.
is so relevant today. It's scary. It really, really is. Dusty
Yeah.
saw something, and it's crazy that he didn't have that planned out. He was in the control room, ready. And he was ready to do a promo, and that was it.
Right. Right. It was just impromptu. And that tends to be the best when something is impromptu and organic and just comes from you. I think that's the best. And everybody borrows from everybody else. I get
True.
that.
Very,
That's
very
that's
true.
part of it. But you got to find yourself and be yourself.
Yes, indeed. So, moving on to the book now. Now, this is the third edition of this book. So, I wanted to ask you, what was the motivation in writing this book?
Wow, that's kind of very deeply personal. So I hope I don't get too emotional with that.
No, no, no. Go,
Um,
go, go.
my brother, my brother wrote he's one of the first people to write about the black wrestlers.
Hmm.
Um, 1999, he wrote Black Stars of Professional Wrestling,
Okay.
and he wrote several different. I think it was on his third edition of that book in 2019. He passed in 2020,
Mhm.
and he wrote the first edition in 2009, the first edition of the Pro Wrestling's Black World Champions.
Right.
And it was just one of those things where, my brother had just finished the third edition of Black Stars of Professional Wrestling. He was out promoting that and just unexpectedly died, and I was going through his things, like you have to clean up,
All the stuff, yeah.
and I found that book.
Mm.
Because the original book was a booklet, if you will. It was probably about 20 pages. It was a PDF. And so, because even at that time, there were probably 2009, there were probably about 15 people that he had in there, maybe, something like that. So
Okay.
it wasn't that many of us who were champions, because that's what the
Right.
book was about, just world
Mm. World
champions.
champions, right.
So that's what really gave me the idea. I wanted to kind of celebrate my brother and continue his legacy. And
Mhm.
so in 2022, I put out the second edition of the book, which was about 80 something pages, because there were like 21, I think, wrestlers that I had in there. There were a few more.
For
So,
sure.
and even now, it's up to this is the one I think that is really uh the best, because it's the largest. It's really more of me and my personality. And I've added the Black World Tag Team Champions to this one.
Yes, yes. And we're going to get to some of those wrestlers in a little bit. But how long did it take you to research and really dig deep into getting the information? Granted, we're in the information age now with the internet, Wikipedia, but the fact check and all this. What was that process, and how long was it? How that lengthy the process?
That's something I never stopped doing.
Hmm.
It was something from that particular, and I actually feel like, and one of the reasons I put out a third edition, there are more people that I can include, but I feel like I kind of rushed the second edition to the market.
I see.
Um, because I was emotional. I
Yeah.
lost my brother, and but I still put a lot of work into it, a lot of thought into it. I probably spent a year
Mm.
just doing the research for that particular edition. And like I say, it never stopped. I kept When that one comes out, I start having more contacts with other people and meeting more
Hmm.
historians and other people, and it's just been a phenomenal experience for me.
Yeah. I mean, because, when you have that type of data and you're trying to get those facts out there, so granted you want to appeal to the wrestling fans, but I'm sure there might be a casual fan that's never even gone that deep that you can win over by giving those facts in regards to these titles and the dates that these champions have held those titles. You know what I mean? Because us wrestling fans have been watching for years. We're very, very protective of history and what we saw and how people try to correct some of
Right.
those things that may have won some wars, if you know what I mean. So it's good that this type of literature is out there for the public to see, so we can see, oh wow, they won these titles here in this territory, that territory. Okay, I get it now. So it's good that you took the time, over a year to really get into this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it was a passion project,
Hmm.
so and it still is. I mean, I actually enjoy doing that research. When you do something that you love, it doesn't really feel like work.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's
Absolutely.
that's been that's been the key for me. Just trying to make sure that like you're saying, fact checking and everything, trying to make
Hmm.
sure that I'm accurate with everything. And that was even one of the reasons why to talk about a couple of the people, I didn't have that many of the black female wrestlers in the second
Hmm.
edition. And one reason for that was because, it was more about the promotions themselves than me per se. It was like,
Mm-hmm.
WWE, like uh, Naomi or somebody was like they would call him the Raw champion or
Mm-hmm.
the SmackDown champion.
Right.
So I'm like, well, I'm only putting out the world
World
champion.
champion.
So who is your world champion? And so like now, I guess they've decided that I believe the for the women's side, the SmackDown I think is the WCW Women's Champion, and Raw is the WWE Women's Champion, and the other one is the
Women's
WWE
world
Women's
women's
World,
world champion. Right. The women's
right?
world champion. Right.
Which is what they should have called them all along.
Right. But I think when the when VKM, he's really all about branding. So when he had the Raw Women's Champion, the SmackDown Women's Champion, he really wanted that brand to really be, you know what I mean? So he was very brand oriented, and again, that, his company, his rules, whatever. But I get but as a fan, I can understand what you're saying as well, because these are true world championship belts, and they should be treated as such. I get it.
Right, right. On the men's side, the same way. Roman Reigns had all the belts, the universal, undisputed, universal WWE champion.
Champion.
He's the man on top, and then all of a sudden, you just create something called the World Heavyweight Championship.
Right.
So, are you reducing Roman? You know what I'm saying? What was your need for create? There was no explanation for, creating another world heavyweight, title belt. And I guess now they've discontinued
The Universal, yeah, it's just
universal.
back to it's just the WWE Championship and the World's Heavyweight Championship. So that's how
Right.
it right. That's how it should be. So in the book's intro, you started off with the book with the quote from Swerve Strickland right after he had won the AEW World Championship, when he stated, "My champion is black."
Yes.
Talk about the
Yes.
tone that you wanted to set with having that quote being the first thing that the readers would see.
Because it's so, people may not realize what you have to go through to be a champion. And this is even, for the white wrestlers.
Mm-hmm.
It's because it's not purely based on your talent. There's so many things that promotions look at, because they looked at other people before we had Ron Simmons, the universally recognized first black
Black world champion.
world
Right.
champion. There were other people that they looked at, and for some reason they decided, okay, I'm not going to put the belt on this guy, because they're looking at your character, they're looking at the way you behave. It's all of
That's a
these
lot
other
of
things.
things.
You have to, like black folks always said back in the day, you had to be better than best.
Mm-hmm. That's very true. I mean, look at the story that goes around. God bless, Butch Reed, God rest his soul, but he was supposed to have won the Intercontinental Championship from Ricky the Dragon Steamboat in 1987. He no-showed, and Honky Tonk Man was there, and Honky Tonk Man went on to be one of the greatest Intercontinental champions of all time. So it's like, I not like Butch Reed. I
Yeah.
loved his work.
Yes. And he had great matches with Ric Flair. You
Oh
could
my
tell
God,
that they
yeah.
were like setting him up for the championship. But I don't know, something may have happened that they decided that we're not going to put the strap on Butch, because it
Wow.
was huge. He had, great matches with Ric Flair and several. But for some reason, it's like Tony Atlas and Hulk Hogan.
Right.
Tony was right there at the same time, and Tony press slammed Hulk Hogan. But all of a sudden, Hogan gets the push, and Tony is, almost like an afterthought.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess the consolation prize for him was winning the World Tag Team Championships with Rocky Johnson. You know what I mean? Soul Patrol. So that
Yes.
was the consolation prize. But I get it, because Tony Atlas, Mr. USA, he was just as big. I mean, that dude was jacked, and he still is to this day
Right.
in great
Right.
shape. You know what I mean? 70 something years old and his bench press at 400, 500 pounds. It's like, good grief. You know what I mean? And, but to your point, it's like, and I'm in the wrestling business too, as I told you before, as a ring
Yeah,
announcer. And I've seen instances where, man, like out of the blue, there were title changes I didn't know were going to happen, which I actually like because it makes the announcement of the new champion very organic and real.
yeah,
And to me, when I'm like, oh my god, this is great. You know what I'm saying? Very deserving. So I like that, but there's a lot of decisions that goes into what happens when someone goes over or someone has to do a job. I mean, that's just the nature of the business.
right, right. And it's and that's what made it so special. That's why I wanted people to understand that it's important and it's significant for still even in this day for a black person to be the franchise, the face of the
Hmm.
company. Although I
Right.
know Jay Lethal is the franchise in Ring of Honor, but
Yeah, big ups to Jay Lethal, man. Big ups to Jay Lethal. Our jersey. That's the I always rep my Jersey wrestlers all day. 100%. Now, you've also talked about a promo between Triple H and Booker T from 2003 that was leading up to their encounter at WrestleMania 19, for the World Heavyweight Championship. Now, there were some serious racial undertones in that promo that even now age really, really bad. You know what I mean? But from your
yes.
from your perspective in that moment, and even in, I guess you want to look at it in hindsight now, what did that say about how did people view African Americans in professional wrestling?
Well, I mean, like we were not qualified. We were not capable.
Hmm.
I understand selling the show. You're trying to sell some tickets. So, you're trying,
Right.
and Triple H was the heel. So I get it.
Right.
But when you go too far with things, because, even in sports, the commentators, let's just say, when the black athlete does something, they say, oh, he's athletic. They talk about his
Right.
athleticism.
Athletic. Right.
When the white guy does something, he's smart. And you'll hear it in wrestling. That was a smart move. They don't say that about the black wrestler, though. The black sports. So, that's it kind of made us look like we were not qualified.
Right.
And he I personally I think Triple H just got caught up in the moment and went too far. I know Booker T, having been at that time the 5-time WCW champion,
Champion. Right.
it's like he was the face of WCW, the best of WCW. So I think it was a WWE trying to rub it in on
The
WCW
WCW. Right.
more so than Triple H and Booker T. And that's why I
Right.
say I think he kind of got caught up in it. And you didn't, but when you start talking about nappy hair and
Yeah. That
ebonics, the
was the
way a
part.
person talks,
Right. Right.
that's what crossed the line.
I was at home and I'm just like, ooh.
Friends,
That was,
yeah,
yeah, a little bit of cringe. I'm like, really? Are we going there now?
you
I'm
actually
like,
say
my
that.
God. Yeah, and I mean, again, the real life Paul Levesque, had his transgressions, health wise, whatever, and he's in a much different place in his life.
Yeah.
And Booker T is clearly, has gone on to do some tremendous things inside the industry, outside the industry, with his pro wrestling school, Reality of Wrestling down in Houston. Shout out to Booker T and a lot of talented wrestlers that he's training now. But back to that though, to me, it was just like I understand you're trying to sell a pay per view. You're trying to sell this match. Because of course, every Booker T was very very beloved. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And he was destined for superstardom from day one.
Yeah,
But I just felt that was a bit unnecessary, and it didn't age well. It really really didn't.
it was. And at that time, it was so powerful. That's what did it for Sting. Sting heard that, and I'm not going to WWE. And eventually he did.
Yeah.
Then when they finally made him an offer that he couldn't refuse, he wrestled
Right.
maybe 2 or 3 matches. Or so, it was something kind of token just to get that money. But Sting even said after the way they treated Booker T, I'm not going there.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I think it was an instance where The Rock said Booker T, "Who the hell are you?" or something like that. I think it was that promo, and
Right.
that's what kind of did sting. But I'm sure the Triple H promo didn't do any favors either, because they were willing to roll the red carpet out for Sting. Flair had been on records telling Sting when he came back to WCW, you need to go up to New York. You
Yeah.
need to go to New York. And even Booker T has mentioned that Hogan was telling Booker T, you need to go to New York. This is around 97, 98, where he started getting hot as a single, where he had the best of
Yeah.
seven match and, trying to
Oh,
get
yeah.
himself going. Hogan was telling Booker T, you should go to New York. They'll make you a star. They'll make you a bigger star. But I tell you what, who listened was Triple H, because right when he had the match with Alex Wright at Starrcade '94, and his deal was about to be up, and
Mhm.
Flair knew where he was going. He said, "You're going to be a star."
Yeah.
So, and think about it. Flair was there 4 months, 5 months, and he became the champion. So he was looking at it from his experience. Hey, man,
Yeah.
if they can make me, they'll clearly make you a star too. So he was looking at it from his experience.
Yeah, and that really wasn't fair to a fair comparison, because Ric Flair is just a legend, and Rick is
Right.
probably the only person. And correct me if I'm wrong on this, but Rick is, like, I think, the only person from WCW to become the WWE champion.
So it was Flair. So from what I understand, looking back, it was Flair. Let's see, going through my mental Rolodex now. Well, if we can count the Undertaker, because the Undertaker came from WCW,
That is,
and there
yes.
was a matter of fact, he
Yeah.
became the champion 1 year after he debuted.
Well, yeah, you're actually right. So, yeah, the more I think about that, because
Sid,
Undertaker,
Sid, you
uh,
got to think about
uh,
Sid. Sid became the
yes,
champion.
yes,
So there's been a lot
um,
of people that
Stone
were
Cold
Stone
was
Stone
Stunning
Cold,
Steve and
stunning.
WC.
Mick Foley. You
Yeah,
know,
there were a few. Yes.
there was quite a few. So they definitely had their hand. They had a lot of talent. Think about now, and we'll go on to the next question. But even the Brainbusters, Tully and Arn, became World Tag Team Champions in the WWE. So
Yeah, but back to the point, though, it was WWE that made them champions. Now,
very
anybody
true.
who was a champion in WCW, I think Ric Flair was the only one to become a
Yeah, a
champion.
champion. Right.
Right.
Very,
It's
very
like they
right, right,
wanted to
right.
make their own champions. If you were a
Very, very
champion
true.
somewhere else, you're not going to be our champion.
Right. Very, very true. Because they definitely didn't do that with Dusty Rhodes. Sure.
No.
No. So the film Queen of the Ring, which is a biopic about the late great Mildred Burke, also talk about a black female wrestler, Ethel Johnson, who was portrayed by Trinity Fatu, better known to the world as Naomi. Side note, congratulations to her and her husband, Jonathan, better known as Jimmy Uso, on the announcement
Yes.
of her pregnancy. So God bless you all, and best wishes
Mhm.
to Naomi on a safe delivery of the baby. But you mentioned Ethel in the book and how she was a trailblazer in this industry. And I know black men had it hard, in those times, and I know women had it hard in those times, but the treatment of black women was far worse than anything. Talk
Oh,
briefly about Ethel and the barriers that she and women like her sisters, Babs Wingo and Marva Scott, had to truly make it in wrestling.
yeah, it was their strong desire to really be there, because when you think about what they had to go through at that time,
Hmm.
traveling, they couldn't stay in hotels.
Right.
They couldn't eat in the restaurants with the others, or they had to eat in a corner, or had to take it
Right.
out somewhere. And this is every city that you're going into.
Yeah.
And you're getting that discrimination even inside of the ring. They want you to, they had to wrestle each other, even though they were traveling with other women. You know, it, they couldn't, in the deep South, they could
For
not
sure.
wrestle the white
Right.
women.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, you really had to, you really had to love the sport and enjoy it to put up with that. And they were actually making pretty good money. I must admit, I haven't seen that film yet, so I can't really talk about that. But I know Mildred Burke was making $50,000 a year back in the 50s.
And that was a lot of money. And I actually did see Queen of the Ring opening weekend, and to really tell a story about someone who really broke the barrier for all women at that time. And they told the story about Mae Young in that film,
Okay.
and how she was more or less an enforcer. Whereas, like, if they needed, if somebody didn't want to do business right, Mae Young would be
Right.
right there. Thus, why Bubba Ray Dudley said that's the toughest man he's ever been in the ring with.
Right. Mae Young and Fabulous Moolah, same way.
Yeah,
And Moolah basically controlled women's wrestling.
she did for that period. Once she got her, that was the control. You know what I mean? That was reality. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah. But yeah, that the kind of hardship that they had to go through, and that's why I'm glad to see them getting their props. I was glad to see um, Ethel inducted into the Hall of Fame, and even
Mm-hmm.
her and her sisters have been inducted into a women's wrestling Hall of
Wrestling Hall of
Fame as
Fame,
well.
right? Definitely. Let's talk about the 1900s for a second. We've seen the color barrier, break in major sports. Jack Johnson becoming the first black heavyweight champion in boxing heavyweight champion. Jackie Robinson in 1947 broke the color barrier in baseball. Willie O'Ree broke the color barrier in the NHL, joining the Boston Bruins in 1958. But in pro wrestling, blacks were not permitted to wrestle against the whites, like you mentioned. But Bearcat Wright stood up to the Indiana State Athletic Commission, which led
Yes.
to because he was talking about which led to desegregation in the state of Indiana. With
Yes.
that being said, what does the 1900s look like when it comes to the advancement of black people?
It's so much has taken place, and I don't think people realize just how much progress was made and how much people had to suffer and had to go through.
Mhm.
Because Bearcat, same way, he was facing a lot of opposition,
Mm-hmm.
and so when he finally won the belt, um, and he's like, I'm not going to wrestle anymore for these segregated matches.
Right.
And Indiana, they wanted to strip him until the NAACP got involved, and then
Right.
they just say, okay, we don't need that kind of trouble. And like you were saying, so that's what kind of led to some of the other commissions around the country deciding that, okay, we're going to have a big lawsuit on our hands. Do we really want to go through that?
Right.
Um, but yeah, all of those little successes like that paved the way. And um, Bearcat was labeled difficult to work with. You
Shocker.
know, one of the barriers that's always in the way with
Mm-hmm.
with black people. And
Mm-hmm.
and that's the whole point of deciding who's going to be a champion. They look at all of
All of
those
those
kinds of things,
things. Right.
and not even putting it in context. Do you know what the man went through? So yeah, he probably, it probably went to his head a little bit, and then said, he enjoyed being the champion.
Right.
You
Exactly.
but you talk to him, you get him to understand that, hey, the guy did the job for you, you got to do the job for him, you
Right.
know, and talk to him, but don't just label him as difficult to work
Difficult to
with.
work
And
with. That's yeah. That's not a reputation you want to have. And I think that's the excuse that they do want to label you when you don't want to. Or I guess when you're standing up for yourself.
right,
You know what I mean? Like
right,
that labels that, and that's not good. I don't like that.
right. It's not, and it's not fair to the
No,
person.
it's not.
And I know I shouldn't say that because life is not fair. I get that as well. But in a sport where, it's more than your, The
ability.
ring is, it's not
Right. It
really
was more
what.
than your ability. Right.
Come on now. You got to have a little grace with people at times.
Agreed. August 2nd, 1992, 33 years ago, this past August 2nd, Ron Simmons won the WCW World Heavyweight Championship by beating Vader in Baltimore, Maryland. Now, in the history books that we talked about earlier, that Bobo Brazil was the first, black, world champion in wrestling. That aside, talk about what the moment meant to the industry and the entire world when Ron Simmons won the championship and he was on the shoulders of all the wrestlers and they were carrying him around the ring. That was monumental. And I was 13 and a half at that time and I almost cried
Right.
because I hadn't seen nothing like that before. And I get chills thinking about it now because he was known as the All American Ron Simmons.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And you talk about a guy he was in the Heisman running, you know what I mean? And he's in the College Football Hall of Fame. Like
Right.
this guy is, he's done it all on the gridiron, and now he's on the top of the food chain in wrestling as the WCW World Champion. Talk about really what that meant.
Probably the only way to that the only thing that I can think of in modern times to get people to understand that it was probably like when Barack Obama won the
Yes,
president.
indeed. Yeah.
It
Hmm.
was that kind of feel. It was, wow, I can't believe it. It
Right.
actually happened.
Right.
People were crying. Kids were crying. They were really emotional. They couldn't believe it. And the guys from the locker room, everybody rushed the ring to celebrate with Ron because we do know that things are scripted, but
For
you
sure.
know what what the audience doesn't always understand is that wrestlers can change their mind in the ring.
Oh, absolutely.
You don't know if Vader's going to do the job today, or or whomever. Because even Hogan talked about that with Andre.
Andre, I was literally just about to say that because he didn't know what the finish was until he pinned him. That is, if that was about as close to a shoot as you could think about.
Right. He just kept him guessing. Oh yeah, everything's good, and just Hogan's nervous the whole time because
Yeah,
let's just be honest, you're not going to beat Andre unless he allows you to.
allows you to.
It's not going to happen. I mean, so yeah, it was that kind of almost euphoria when Ron Simmons won the
Right,
title. For everybody, it was a big uplift to the sport, and
indeed.
all of the even the white wrestlers were really excited for him because they could see what this was doing to the sport itself,
Right,
and it gives some recognition to um, the black audiences, recognizing that we are here, we've been here, um, and we've been supporters of pro wrestling for years, just like everybody else. Because there's a stigma that one of the things of not giving the black guy the championship, will they draw tickets?
mm,
Can you make money? Well, I'm like,
right,
did you see the matches that Bobo Brazil had with Buddy Rogers? The first Nature Boy, Buddy Rogers.
right. The original Nature Boy, right? The first
And that,
WWE champion, right?
right. And that's and you actually mentioned that. And for the audience, they may not know um it, Bobo beat Buddy Rogers for the NWA World title back in '62, and it was a gimmick match. Buddy claimed that he was injured during the match, and so Bobo was like, "Well, no, I don't want to win the belt on the technicality," so it was given
Right,
back to to
right.
Buddy Rogers, and Bobo was never recognized by the NWA as the world champion.
Wow, that and it's crazy. Like obviously they weren't. There was record keeping, but it wasn't that the record keeping that we keep today. So, but again, that's why I want to say, hey, listen, Bobo, there, technicality, yeah, he was champion, but Ron really took it to the next level, and he is widely respected by many in and outside of the industry.
Yeah,
Now, I Okay.
He was actually one of the guys that I actually interviewed Ron, for this book. Um, he told me that, he was very emotional that day and very pleased with how things went. And, overall, he just said, man, I'm totally satisfied with my career and what I've done.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't get any higher than that, man. And like I said, big ups to the Ron Simmons. Now I mentioned black women, in the early days, but let's talk about the 90s moving forward. And we got, Jackie Moore, Jazz, Awesome Kong, Alicia Fox, now is known as Vix Crow, Layla
Yes.
L, Mercedes
Yes.
Monet, Naomi, Bianca Belair. Talk about the evolution of black women in this industry and how they're perceived today.
I think they're much more respected and accepted today.
Hmm.
Um, but really, women like Jackie and Jazz, they were so determined.
Hmm.
Um, they fought guys and
Oh, she sure
won.
did. Oh yeah,
Routinely. That was something that they regularly
they
did
did.
because they uh, beautiful women, but they understood it's about my talent. They wanted you to know that they could wrestle. I'm not eye candy.
Right.
Becky had a role as a manager at one time and all. And yes, you may look good, but I'm a professional wrestler. I
Wrestler.
can do this.
Right.
And that's what really made even today. Mercedes Monet, back when she was in WWE at NXT, that her, Bailey, um, Charlotte Flair,
Becky Lynch.
Becky, yes, they were they were the four horse women,
Hmm.
and they set that standard of we're going to raise women's professional wrestling,
And they
and they
sure
did.
did. Yeah.
They did. We saw pure wrestling, and that was great.
Yeah, actually, last week was the 10-year anniversary of Sasha and Bailey at NXT Takeover Brooklyn, which is still one of the greatest matches of all time. And they were very young in their careers in WWE.
Yeah, yeah. It's amazing what they've done, and I really think that the black females now are really getting their respect. And you mentioned Vix Crow and Layla L. When that during that era there was the Divas Championship.
Right.
They kind of got criticized for because it was more of a Divas belt instead of a like a respected championship belt. But that's what they had.
And they
You
had to
know, it's
fight, and they had to fight for minutes.
right.
Like Michelle McCool was just talking about, even as people thought that she was secure because of who she was married to, but not even, because they had to fight for minutes. They had to fight for
Right.
segments. They had to fight for their segments potentially getting cut. So I get it.
Yeah, yeah. It was real tough for them, and they should be respected for what they did. And actually, that old women's title, Layla was actually the last person to have that title, and I don't think she was defeated. I think she's the lineal champion, if you will.
You
Technically,
might be, yeah. I think
that
so.
belt was retired. She wasn't like
Yeah.
it was lost.
Yeah, and I wish